Hello. Today I'd like to talk to you about what may be the most common opening in the world and why you shouldn't play it. The opening is called the Gioco Pianissimo, at least that's what grown-up chess players often call it, which sounds terrifying, so I tend to call it Old Stodge, which may give you a clue about why you shouldn't play it. It really is very dull and boring and stodgy and, toffee-ish. It's but let's have a look at it. Let's see what it is. So we start off e4, grab the centre, prepare to develop your pieces. e5, just the same from black. Knight f3, develop a piece, prepare to castle, attack the centre, and restrict black's choices. All very good. Knight c6, defending the pawn, controlling the centre, developing a piece. All very good. Bishop to c4 from white. Which definitely prepares to castle. White can castle now. Develops a piece, controls the centre, all very good. And black replies bishop to c5. Now I've got no problem with any of those moves. Those are all great moves, and you should play them at least to start off with. You can play them to start off with, but the next few moves often go d3 from white, preparing to develop the bishop on c1. Knight f6 from black, knight c3 from white, and d6 from black, which is all very balanced and proper and symmetrical, and well motivated in the way that I've described. There were good reasons for making all the moves, but this, because it's so symmetrical, there's not a lot going on, at least apparently. It's and it is very difficult to make things get started. There's a couple of ideas here which I'll talk about for both sides, I guess, but it does tend to be a bit slow and unexciting sort of chess. And in particular, I always say there's a fourth rule of the opening. The rules of the opening are get your pieces out, get hold of the centre, get castled. Both sides doing this perfectly. But there's a fourth rule which is less often mentioned, and that is prepare to develop your rooks. An opening, says Cecil Purdy, an opening is only as good as the chances that it offers young ambitious rooks. So here are my rooks in the corner here. Now what chance have they got of entering the game? I think not blooming much. The way you can develop a rook typically, get a rook into the game, is you put it behind a pawn that is going to be swapped off, and then it can have a look down the board. Now at the moment this rook on the king's side is behind the h pawn. That's not going to get swapped off very soon. So where could you move the rook? You could move it to f1 when you castle, which is fine, except that I don't think this f pawn is going to get swapped off very soon. It may be if black decides to gang up on it and take it, but I don't think it's going to get swapped off very soon. You could swap it off if you manage to move it to f4, but there's a knight in the way, so that's not a great place for the rook. You could castle and then move the rook to e1, and this pawn, the e pawn, the one that's furthest advanced, might get swapped off, but it'll only get swapped off if black manages to play f5. There's a knight in the way, or if they manage to play d5, and at the moment that square is attacked 3 times and will be defended twice only by black, so that just loses a pawn. So I don't think the rook's got a square to move to where it's going to enter the game very quickly. Some juniors, and you may already be thinking this, will play a move like h4, and then you can develop the rook to h3 and then g3, and then it's in the game. But if you do put the rook on h3, there's a problem over here, which means you're going to lose a bishop for a rook. So I don't think either side are going to get to play with their rooks, not for a long while. And the rooks together, 5 pawns each, they usually say they're worth, and that's more than a queen. I mean, you wouldn't start a chess game without feeling a little nervous if somebody said you can't move your queen or you start without your queen. But I mean, both sides here are saying, well, we're going to play the game without our rooks. So not so good, and it is a funny position this sometimes because the centre is so closed. If you castle, it sometimes happens that well, let's play the move. If you castle and your opponent doesn't, your king can get stuck on that side while your opponent attacks your king, and because everything's a bit solid and stuck in the centre, you can't move pieces, these two pieces, you can't move them across to defend very well. So sometimes you can actually get, it's actually more dangerous playing this apparently safe system than other systems. Now there are some ideas about how to play this position. For example, the best way for white, I think, is to play the bishop over to g5, and if black doesn't do anything about it, let's play a silly move for black, then you can gang up on the on this knight on f6, and if black is foolish enough to castle, you can make a hole in their king side, and now you're very well placed. You can move your knights across to this square, you can move your queen to this square, threatening checkmate. That's a nice little attack, that really is. So that kind of works. But that's only if black doesn't know it and doesn't know it's happening and doesn't know it's coming, and then they play in this position h6, and then you have to swap off your bishop or retreat it, and that doesn't work so well. Let's have a very quick look at both of those. If you swap it off, you can move the knight in here, which forks the queen and the pawn, so the queen has to retreat to d8, and now you can roll up the centre a little bit. So this is perhaps the best plan of all in this Gioco Pianissimo, this Old Stodge called a canal variation, and that's a good way to play it. Is to try and get in this move d4. We saw how d5 was very hard for black in earlier, so that's not a bad way to play entirely, although it's only equal, I think. Retreating can be a bit tricky because if you can get the bishop shut out of the game on this square. It's not really clear where that bishop's going to be able to move to next if it gets stuck here. And of course, if you castle, then we have this position that I talked about, where black's coming down the king side at you, doesn't have to castle king side themselves, and you may be in a lot of trouble. So that's perhaps that is one way to play it, but after h6 take. Another idea in this position is to play the bishop to e3 with the hope that if black takes, well, we've got an open line for our rook, hooray, which is very much what we're after. But if black knows about that, they won't take your bishop, they'll just drop their own bishop back, and if you take their bishop, then they get an open line for their rook. So that tends not to work out so well. Chigorin over a century ago said you could play here and maybe castle kingside, and that might be slightly less boring than usual, but we're only talking about just exactly how boring is this. So I don't think this is ever so suitable a way of playing, and that's when players play it well. I mean, very often in a junior game I see things like these little country moves of just doing something because they can't think of anything better to do. So I don't think this is ever so good to play. It can be dangerous because you can get your king caught. It's often boring when it's not dangerous because it's all a bit stodgy and stuck. And it's very unkind to your rooks, who were looking forward to a nice game of chess, and they're just stuck in the corners being used as paperweights, really, to stop the board rolling up. So what should you do instead? Well, there's lots of things you can do instead, as white at least. In the main line of the canal variation, I showed you this position where you're trying to get d4 in. Well, just start by trying to get d4 in. So play c3, knight f6, d4, hurrah! We're going to get probably some pawns swapped, We're going to get some open lines. We're going to get a square that you can put your rook on, a file you can put your rook on, and we're going to get a more exciting game. So that's all great. Alternatively, you can try and so in this position you've got d4 in, but black's attacking your e pawn, which you might not be so comfortable with. If you can pay a pawn in this position, Evans Gambit. You can pay a pawn, have a free pawn, and then you get c3 in for free, and then d4, and you get this. So you get your d4 move in. You're going to get exciting open lines. You know where you want to put your rooks and so on. And your e-pawn's not being attacked, but you have paid a pawn. So is that a good value? Is that have you got a bargain? Maybe, maybe not. But it's a much better and a more exciting way to play chess than Old Stodge. Old Stodge I should credit to E.M. Forster, a great English humanist novelist, who describes it as a desert of chess. And so I think you should play in a more interesting way. One other tip for black, actually, if you play bishop c4 in this position as white, so if you're facing black, you're playing black, you can play here knight to f6, the two knights defence, which is a little bit more interesting, and there are other videos about that. Bye for now.